Hey guys, how you doing tonight? Just went and got some ice cream, because ice cream's grand. I look like a friggin' hobo right now, don't I? Look at me. I love looking at my videos just because, like, I've got some that I've got this ridiculous beard and some where I'm nice and clean shaven and my hair looks good. And then I've got these where I'm like, okay, it's the apocalypse and I've got to save the world. I just look like a crazy homeless person right now. Oh well, what can you do? I feel like everybody looks like a crazy homeless person these days. Even really nice looking people are just like, I don't know what to think. I'm gonna warn you right up. I've definitely had something to drink, and I'm definitely smoked some weed, which I think is great and I think is fine. I endorse it. Everyone should enjoy themselves in this world as much as they possibly can. Oh yeah. Oh man. So I think I've decided how I'm going to actually organize things a little bit better in this channel. I think this channel is going to be more like the YouTube stuff. I think is going to be for everything. I think everyone will be involved in YouTube who wants to be involved in YouTube. All my videos will be on YouTube. But I think I'm going to really save the YouTube videos for the nerd shit. What I'm starting to call the nerd shit, right? What's the nerd shit, John? Like, the real going a little bit deeper than just like the spark up hot takes. I think Instagram and like other platforms might be okay for like just like the surface level hot take. But I think if you want to dig any deeper than that, if you want to go anywhere, I think it's got to be these long form YouTube videos. And I think those are two different things. Jordan Peterson's coming my way. Jordan Peterson is releasing a new book. Jordan Peterson's releasing a new book. Ah, man. I'm not looking forward to it. And I am looking forward to it at the same time. Because while I find his views on, like, his critique of society is weird. His base critique of society is fundamentally very strange. And I think it's because he's lived so detached from the material component of what society actually looks like and what it actually is, that he's living in this kind of fantasy made up reality where you don't need to worry about survival. Like, what I think we're really looking at with Jordan Peterson, I have two takes on Jordan Peterson that I think are pretty ridiculous. But like, anyone who thinks that you have to, or that capitalism is a voluntary procedure, right? Anyone that thinks that everyone's voluntarily engaging in this thing that we call capitalism is a deeply deluded person. Like, this capitalist system thrives on a form of wage slavery. That's not even controversial. Not even a tiny little bit. The Lincoln Republicans, like Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Republicans defined what we're living under as wage slavery, right? They ran on a platform of ameliorating wage slavery. We're really aware that what we're living under is a long union history. There's a long worker struggle, all surrounding this idea that, hey, maybe we shouldn't live in wage slavery. And we've never been able to get rid of it in a way that's proper. And so if you're walking around thinking, all of these people who serve me are doing so because they want to, and I'm so much better than them, you're living in a deluded dream world. Just at the fundamental base of your moral thinking, right? you're looking at the world in this extraordinary way. Boop, boop, that I don't think can be taken too seriously. And yet we're supposed to take him seriously, right? Like he gives a certain degree of credibility to conservatives and to capitalists, or at least he makes them feel as though they have a certain level of credibility and prestige. But the guy is like completely detached from a materialistic worldview, a worldview in which there are material things that we need for our survival, right? He's completely separated himself from these really base functions, these fundamental sort of things. And I feel like if you have detached yourself from your base material self and your base material needs, you lose sight of how the world works and what really matters. And if you live in your head the way that he does, right? Like, I wrote something one time, a little while ago, well, a long time ago now, I wager. It was called, Jordan Peterson is what happens if you let a man sit around doing nothing. One of the major critiques of the basic income movement, while I was working in it more vigorously than I can now, or that I do now, but one of the true like critiques that came the way it was always people just sit around doing nothing, right? People just sit around doing nothing. They'll just sit around and they'll just do nothing, right? But like, Jordan Peterson is a man who's been allowed to sit in a room by himself thinking and contemplating about the nature of life and reality. And then he comes out of that room where he sits around thinking about the nature of life and reality and all of that. And he talks to people about it. And he talks to people about his thoughts, about what he's seeing in the world, right? And like, that's his life. That's what he does. He sits around not doing much of anything. Like, he's not producing anything. He's not working at anything, right? He's, at best, you could call him a cheerleader, right? What he is a cheerleader for, I think, is up to a certain degree of debate. But you can, at best, call him a cheerleader. A motivational speaker, if you want. He's not building anything. He's not doing anything. He's not living in a material sort of sense. That even if he himself were to attempt to define his job, it would live in a sort of ethereal upward space. More in the space of like a priest, or some kind of administrator, you know, some kind of like monarchical figure. And so this guy isn't actually living in the world, and he's not actually like, he doesn't have his feet planted. Which is why he can fall for, like, I hear people call him a grifter. I don't think Jordan Peterson is actually a grifter, right? I do genuinely think that he himself thinks that what he is thinking is the right thing to think. I do think that of him. I don't think he's actively working to manipulate and deceive people. I think that he's got enough self-deception going on, right? Like, the more I think about Jordan Peterson, the more I see a man who came out of Alberta, born to a family of ranchers, I believe ranchers. But I mean, if he's coming out of rural Alberta, chances are good it's ranchers or farmers, you know? So he comes out of that kind of community, ignorant of and not really cognizant of the fact that his family is living on land that was granted to them largely for free by an enormous government grant from land that was largely stolen. Like, there's that enormous sort of history that he is not really aware of, or chooses not to make personal, right? It doesn't live in his base, right? It doesn't live in the base of his spine. Maybe it lives in a category somewhere up here, right? Maybe there's something in his brain where it's been filed away in a back corner somewhere, but it doesn't live in his heart, and it doesn't live in his cock. Like, it doesn't live in his body at all. He just, maybe it's like a fact he knows. And from there, he gets to go off to university for basically free, again, because of the society he lives in and the government he has at the time. And what's he do with that time where he's granted this kind of thing? He kind of just sits around and doesn't do much of anything. He writes this big wordy book called Maps of Meaning, where he's struggling. And here's something that I actually do think is interesting about Jordan Peterson, is that I do think he is actually struggling in an honest way. I think that he's honestly struggling with these large-scale ideas. I just think that he doesn't respect that so is everyone else, right? And he's been given a lot of time to struggle, and so he's come up with a whole language that he uses. It's his own language, right? It's for him, mainly. And you'd really have to, I think, be in love with Jordan Peterson to start using that language in any kind of meaningful way, right? And it has all the hallmarks and all the makings of like Peterson's sort of inherent desire, right? And I think it's endemic of lots of people. I think there are lots of people that have this little desire to make a little cult. Hi. But I think people want to speak and be heard and be understood and try to communicate something into the world, right? Like I've said previously, if you've seen my podcast on the Hoob, right, what my base belief of things are is that I am an aspect of God, as are you. You are also an aspect of God. And so I take a look at a man like Jordan Peterson, who is himself an aspect of God, and so we should probably be kinder to him than our society wants us to be when critiquing him. We want to be mean to him, because that's sort of built into our base culture, that we want to tear apart everything down to like its atomic level. We want to dismantle and destroy and humiliate on the public stage in a big scale way. And I feel like Jordan Peterson, as his own aspect of God, is attempting to struggle with this. He's attempting to struggle with the fact that he is an aspect of God birthed into the world. And so he wants to be open-minded, but he's not using the knowledge that he does have on himself. Which is fundamentally why he's weak and why he's a weak teacher. And why he isn't really credible to listen to for too long. Right? Like, I feel like if you read 12 Rules of Life, you get this really kind of hard-nosed, like, guy who's trying to buff you in the chest, right? But, like, when I read, I'll put it this way, man, and I'll be upfront, Jordan Peterson helped me through a rough time. I was going through a really rough time when I found Jordan Peterson, and I read 12 Rules of Life. And I read that book the way I think he intended it to be read, which is just like two men sort of biffing each other in the chest and like kind of grounding one another, just being like, right? And this is why no one actually objects. Even his largest critics don't really object with sort of the base intent of the book. But then they go and they try and take him a little bit too seriously, I think, or more seriously than I think he himself even intended to be taken. And they delve a little bit deeper than I think he intended anything to be delved into, really. And at the end of the day, he's just kind of a dude, right? He's just a dude saying some stuff and talking, and he's not really right about a lot of it, and he has some pretty obvious hang-ups, you know, that he clearly doesn't want to just let go of. His own stubbornness is his worst enemy, without a doubt. Because at the end of the day, like, he went to this university, he's lived in this university his whole life. And he's just been surrounded by the university, right? He's been surrounded by the university. And right now, because of his addiction, and because of his own physical ailments. Like, the guy believed that he could go on an all-meat diet. And then found himself in a coma. Like, while simultaneously telling everyone that if you want to interact in the world, you have to have your own shit put together, you know? So I'm kind of approaching this new book that he's coming out with, and I'm really hoping that he's got some humility about him. I really do. Because Peterson's smart. Like, he's a quick guy. He's got a good handle on the language, for sure. He likes retorts, certainly. Right? And he has respect for himself in that he's not going to let people walk over him. And he's going to push back. Right? And as I say these things, I'm like, these are great qualities in a person. Right? These are great qualities in a person. Right? I just think that he never grew up from the prairies. I think that he just got in the university. He had his biases on what the world was like. And lo and behold, his biases match pretty closely to sort of an old rural worldview, that women are subservient to men, that that traditional marriage is a superior way to live, right? And he confirms all of this, all of the old bigotries and biases that we spent the last 20 years pushing up, right? Homosexual marriage, homosexuals being able to adopt children, trans rights, right? These sorts of diversity issues, right, that we've spent the last 20 years really pushing up a hill. And then here comes Jordan Peterson to like try and push it back down a little bit more. And honestly, like, I think the one thing that we can say with a certain degree of satisfaction and pride is that he didn't really succeed that well, that in the end it was just embarrassing for him, right? Like, I think a lot of hate came his way because people saw it that way, and they don't want anyone to be standing up talking shit about trans people or homosexuals. Like, you want to fight for people's right to be free in the world, right? And to live the way that they were born. People should be free to be the aspect of God that they are, right? And who am I as another aspect of God to prevent that from happening? It's absurd. Like, it's an absurdity to say. You're literally looking at an aspect of God and saying, this aspect of God is weaker somehow, and we need to clench it down. What a waste of time and energy. Like, what a waste of time and energy. God created it. You get to shut up. Like, you get to shut up. Like, for real. It's such a, like, small sort of petty, and it comes down to your own self-fears and insecurities, right? That's all it is. At the end of the day, is that it's these, like, self-fears and insecurities, and then you deflect them and put them on someone else. When really all you should be asking yourself is like, hey, am I gay? Sometimes I feel like I'm a bit more feminine. But, like, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, it means something to you, I suppose, but that's just you learning. But if you don't ask yourself those questions, you never find them out. And if you don't ask yourself those questions and instead insist that the problem is the existence of homosexuality and trans people, then you're going to have a tougher time. You're going to have a tougher time. That's all. You're just going to have a tougher time. You're just going to put your head down and grind into that until you die. And everyone's going to be like, why the fuck did he bother doing any of that? So it's just kind of an embarrassment for him. And his climate change denial. I actually think his climate change denial was what did him in all the way. Like, he considered himself this great and powerful intellectual, and then when he started coming out against climate change, people really just were like, that's the end. That's it for him. And then then at the end he has this debate with just like this Russian intellectual, Zhur. I can never remember this guy's name. He talks like this, and he's very winding. He doesn't really make points, honestly. He paints pictures, like he does paint linguistic pictures, but he doesn't really make points ultimately. But even that, like, even this sort of what I consider to be a low-grade intellectual, really, but it's like the only Marxist that Peterson has ever debated. And this guy just twists Peterson around. He's just like, okay, here you are, get out. Right? And makes Peterson look fucking dumb. Like, Peterson comes out in that debate and he's wearing like the slickest, futuristicest looking suit that he can possibly wear. Right? Completely, like, no self-awareness whatsoever that this makes him look like an absolute douchebag. Like, it makes him look like a douchebag capitalist coming out in a suit like this to speak about Marxism, which is a critique of the material conditions and the critique of capitalism. And it's really clear that he basically just picked up a copy of the Communist Manifesto, read it once, and created like a 10-point list of his little nitpicks. And why that's so goddamn stupid to do, Jordan, is because that's what communists have been doing this whole time, right? Communism's been around for a little while, right? Like, if you read the Bible, right, and you can read the Bible and just be like, okay, cool stories, whatever, move on with your life. But if you want to, like, speak and critique and talk about the Bible, there's this whole, like, lineage of writing. There's this whole, like, long, drawn-out kind of conversation that people have been having about the Bible. And what you're going to find is that, like, 9 times out of 10, I say this all the time to people when we get talking about the Bible. People lay a critique at my feet of the Bible, and I'm like, yeah, we know. People have been saying that for a while now, right? Like, we're aware. The great ones, like, you get ones that are, like, literally a millennia old, where you're like, yeah, in the 10th century people said that. Yeah. And so, like, he brings this extremely rudimentary, kind of from the hip critique of, like, the life work of and like the Communist Manifesto itself. Like, he's definitely not read like Capital or any of that, right? And so this guy is just able to twist him about and kind of show, like, and humble him in many ways, I think. And almost immediately after that, the guy ends up in a fucking coma, right? Like, I think that this journey that he went on, like this intellectual, like, kind of thing, like, he does not quite realize that the corporate media is using him, right? He doesn't quite realize that, like, the major reason why he's got his fame and why he's continuously put forward and why he's been grabbed is because he's a useful tool to corporate power. He puts a really nice sounding or smart sounding way to defend a really bad idea. And the end of the day, right? He's like the last gasp of a dead ideology. And we can look at it and just kind of smirk at it and move on, because at the end of the day, it was sort of an embarrassment for him. Like, the whole process of his communist, like, the whole time he was involved in that sphere of conversation with the communists was an outright embarrassment for him. He was, like, dodging other communists and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I still think he's just like a dude, right, who's grappling with some serious ideas and some serious thoughts that he is kind of creating a language himself to sort of address, as I am doing in many ways, right? I talk about God and the deities and all of this kind of stuff, but I feel like because I have my feet planted on the ground and I live in the world, and I understand the material quality of what we're all experiencing, right? I worry about where my food is coming from. I work from that place quite often. Whereas I think Jordan Peterson, he probably stopped worrying about that in his, if ever, right? When's the moment when Jordan Peterson goes like, man, can I pay rent this month? Like, where's that moment for real? Does it exist? That's a question we should ask him. Hey, have you ever had a time where you didn't think you were going to pay rent? I just don't believe that he has ever actually genuinely experienced that in a serious way. And I don't think he really respects people who have, right? I don't think he respects people who have experienced that and who do understand and who have been put on the abandoning edge of the capitalist system, right? That, like, I mean, just look at the United States right now, man. Like, those people have been fucking abandoned. Like, if you're one of those people who's in the truck and you're in the lineup to get food, right? If you're one of those people who's lost your job, if you're one of the 4 million people in America that did not pay rent, like, you've been fucking abandoned. And there's just no other way to describe it. Corporate capitalism has abandoned you. And Jordan Peterson doesn't respect that that's a possibility. He doesn't believe that it exists as an actual outcome or possibility. That all things must just be because it's your fault. That there must be something that you can do about it. And if you can't do it, well, that just means you're weak. That argument works to an extent, right? Like, if I'm in a pool where I can touch the ground in the pool, but I'm scared of letting go of touching the ground in the pool, so that I can float or swim or do anything, then it's fair to say, come on, right? You're just holding back, you can do it, all of that kind of stuff. But if I take that same person and I drop them into the middle of the ocean, and I say, okay, swim to safety, and you can't see land or anything, like, they're dead. And to think otherwise would be insane. It would be like a mad delusion. So, the environment that a person lives in has to matter. It just does. It has to matter. And we have to respect, like, everything Peterson says about standing up with your back straight, just sort of a rephrase of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we are. We're doing that. We just live in an environment that's abandoning us and collapsing, right? We're living in an environment that's gotten very intense very quickly, and we're being told that there's not going to be much by way of a reprieve. And so we're doing exactly that. We're doing everything you're recommending, right? And then you turn around and tell us that we're not to be respected. Because fundamentally we believe that we should be sharing with one another. Because that's the fundamental disagreement, right? That's the fundamental disagreement between capitalists and communists, right? The communist perspective is that we should be sharing with one another. That we shouldn't create systems that exclude or exploit. That we should be sharing, right? And the capitalist system is fundamentally a system that says every man for themselves, which that's what you shout when the ship is sinking, right? Turns out that rising tide actually sank this ship. Didn't raise the boats, it sank the ship. And so I'm eventually going to run into Jordan Peterson. I'm eventually going to read this book that he's going to come out with. Yeah. It's gonna be dumb. It's gonna be dumb, dude. It's gonna be dumb. Yeah, I don't really disrespect Jordan Peterson because I feel like I was a lot like him at one point in my life. When I was much younger, I was a lot like him. Lots of certainty, lots of surety, right? A more ethereal or sort of, yeah, outside the reality of what things were. Not very aware of myself. I don't think Peterson's terribly aware of himself. Yeah. And so it's tough for me. Like, I don't want to denigrate him as a human, as a man who's obviously struggling with his own stuff. But at the same time, like, he's put in front of us for a reason. Corporate power likes what he's saying, so we should be very, very skeptical of it. We should be very, very skeptical of what corporate power thinks is right. All right, that's the end of me, guys. Love y'all.